we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Without the spirit of the Declaration animating the Constitution, and without it giving it its rationale, it loses a lot of its meaning. That we have a Constitution to secure our unalienable rights. And the founders understood this because as they looked at history, being the very practical people that they were, they saw that every republic constituted in the history of mankind had fallen. And that they fell typically not due to external threat or invasion, but they fell typically due to tyranny from within. And our founders, understanding this history, very carefully divided up power between three co-equal branches, legislative, executive, and judicial, and further divided it between the federal and the state level to prevent a concentration of power that would lead to an erosion of liberty and freedom. And the 10th Amendment, of course, is all about that division of power between the federal and the state level that has as its object not merely states' rights. That's not the object. The object is to secure our unalienable rights. That's what government is for in this nation. Of the people, by the people, for the people. Politicians, frankly, of both stripes have forgotten why we have a 10th Amendment. I don't approve of an unelected bureaucrat who leads the IRS telling California what it can and can't do. I rose and spoke in favor of it and spoke specifically to the 10th Amendment. I think I may have even pulled out my Constitution, as I often do, and exhorted my fellow Republicans, even if they disagreed with the underlying social issue, to instead overcome that reticence and vote to uphold the Constitution, which, after all, is part of their oath of office. While I am conservative when it comes to social issues, as a lieutenant colonel in the Army Reserve and as a state assemblyman, my oath of office takes precedence over everything else, doesn't it? Good. I think it's a perfect example for what the 10th Amendment means to me. Either you believe in it or you don't. You don't believe in it when it's convenient to you and your philosophy. You have to support and defend it consistently at all times.
A few things that guide what we do at the 10th Amendment Center. There's some basic principles, and I just like to kind of list them out so you get an understanding of what we do. And the first one is our rights, our freedoms. They're not granted to us by government. They are ours by the nature of our birth. We have our rights and our liberty by the fact that we're human. 2, government only exists and operates with our consent. We the people are in charge. 3, we the people of the several states, we created the federal government and not the other way around. 4, the 10th Amendment codifies in law that we the people created the federal government and they can only exercise those powers that were delegated to it in the Constitution and nothing more. A government without limits is a tyranny. And as Thomas Jefferson and James Madison told us, this is the most important one. When Congress enacts laws or regulations or mandates that are outside the scope of their constitutionally delegated powers, you are not bound to obey them. You do not have to obey unconstitutional laws. All through history, sovereignty was in the hands of one person or two people, a king, a queen, maybe a small cabal of people at the top of the food chain. What the founders and ratifiers gave us was something very unique in history. It was a first. The average people, you and I, we are sovereign. We hold final authority, and government works for us. Most of what the federal government does, most of it, is not constitutional. They're not supposed to tell you how big your toilet's supposed to be, what plant you're supposed to grow, and they're not supposed to force you to buy a car or a health insurance plan or any of it. They're not supposed to tell you that you have to have a registration for your gun, none of it. Chuck asked a very important question. What do we do about it? Do we march on D.C.? Do we beg the federal politicians to give up their power that they've taken? Do we go to federal courts? Do we beg federal judges to rule that the federal power is too big? Vote the bums out and hopefully get less bums? Well, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison said exactly what we're supposed to do about it. The Kentucky Resolutions of 1798. James Madison also co-authored the Virginia Resolutions of 1798. We are not supposed to submit to everything that they tell us they want to do. Whenever Congress enacts laws or regulations outside the scope of their constitutionally delegated powers, they are, quote, unauthoritative, void, and of no force. Those laws are not law unless they are law in line with the Constitution. Thomas Jefferson said, a nullification of the act is the rightful remedy. Nullification is something that was used back in 1798 to protect free speech. It was used in the 1850s to fight federal slavery laws that required northern states to return runaway slaves to the South. Northern states, like my original home state of Wisconsin, said, well, this law does not apply because it's unconstitutional. Nullification is your state looking at a particular federal law, deeming it to be unconstitutional because it does not fit into the enumerated powers, and passing a law saying this is null and void and of no effect in our state. Already 3 states have passed what's known as the Healthcare Freedom Act. This is Virginia, Utah, and Idaho. They've passed a law that says if there's a national health care mandate from the federal government, it is null and void, and it does not have any force in our state. If there were 20 states that said we will not allow a national health care plan in our state, Obamacare would be in the grave. It wouldn't exist. Recently, we have actually released some model legislation. It's called the Federal Health Care Nullification Act, and it's not 1,400 pages. It's not 400, it's not 2, it's 1 single page that bans national health care. And I just want to read one little piece of it here to you. The legislature of the state of blank, whatever, it can be used anywhere, declares that the federal law known as the, quote, Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act is not authorized by the Constitution of the United States and violates its true meaning and intent, and is hereby declared to be invalid in this state, shall not be recognized in this state, is specifically rejected in this state, and shall be considered null and void and of no effect in this state. Any official, agent, or employee of the U.S. government that attempts to enforce or enforces any act or law in violation of this Federal Health Care Nullification Act, get this, shall be guilty of a felony, and upon conviction must be punished by a fine not exceeding $5,000 or a term of prison not exceeding 5 years. So what is this? We're turning it around. They want to put fines on you for not buying a health care plan. But really how it's supposed to work is if they violate your rights, we need to fine them and put them in jail. When enough people get behind something, enough people refuse to comply with the federal government, when enough of us disobey unconstitutional laws, because that is our duty, when enough of us do it, they'll fall to pieces. Sam Adams really is the one who said it best. He said it doesn't take a majority to prevail, but rather a tireless minority, irritated and dedicated to set brush fires in people's minds. And that's what you guys are doing here today. You are dedicated to setting brush fires in other people's minds, to taking this information and getting other people excited in support of the Constitution and of liberty. And that's how we are going to turn this 100-year mess around. But I guess I'm happy to